So we're back in the Tefillas Rosh Hashanah and looking in the RASHASH Sidur, and we're over here on number Kaf Aleph. We're going to read it across the top. There'll be some things we need help with here a little bit, and starts number Kaf Aleph. It said, "V'yikavin lahorid oz yud da'aba, l'gabe hey de'ima shebetzir ro." Now, how do you get from ima in the form of the letters ro? It actually looks like a daled and a vav and a yud, so or a vav. The ima shebetzir ro. So he says, how to get it? L'hamshech abada ma'aba vav oros miyud vav oros the lamed base deceives the chelko yoser al chelko. So he's going to give 6 of his oros. Now these are oros that are coming from the Mochas Timal, which is the Chochmah of Eric Anpin, into the parts of called Chochmah. So he said, Ma'aba Vav Oros, Miyud Vav Oros, the Lamed base, the Sivas, the Chelko from his portion, Yoser al Chelko, that he has more than hers. Now that doesn't make a lot of sense, so we'll go on. Va'az Na'ases B'tzir Gimel Vavim, and he gives that Vav more to her because she had 2 Vavs, and we have to explain how does she have 2 vavs? I saw it as a yud and as a daled and a vav. So let's see what he says. He says he gives her 6 more vavim of the yud, and also the yud that was in the uketz at the corner of the daled. Kaf ches. He gives her 28. Now let's count that up again. He gives. It's hard. The grammar is hard for me because I don't think that's pshat. I think it's something else. So there are lamed based nesivos that come out from the Mochas Timal to Eric Anpin, and you're going to flow to the parts of Chochmah. So Yoser al Chelko, so he's giving her some of his, so he's going to have more than her. I'm not sure what that means exactly. V'oz na'asis b'tzir gimel vavim. We're saying that she was at letter Hey, and it had, I don't know, 3 vavim, or I'm not sure what. The Yud Gematria Kaf Ches, it has 3 vavs, which is 18. And a yud, which is gematria kaf ches. We have to see where this is coming from. So yud chelka v'shisha shenosim lo ma'ava. So she has 6 for her own, 16 for her own portion, because that's her half of the lamed base, the sivas ha'ochma. The matek, and she gives her 6 more. These are actually chosadim, really, I think. So he said lematek hadinim sheba. The says la koch lahotzi haza shu vav al vav vav taluya, which hangs from what's up above it. Now those words are a little bit hard for me to understand. Let me see if I can bring this down without screwing up the. Let's read the light print. The light print says like this. He says, "Os hey ilah." You could divide it into 2 portions. So the first part is removed from it the tip of the daled. So like, let's see, here's a daled, it has a little tip on the end. So we're going to take the tip away, and then it makes it into a resh. So he said, so therefore, we consider it divided resh. Now remember that what we're doing here and we're working on is producing this concept of ryo. Ryo is the gematria of the word gevura, but it's composed of chesadim. It's a contradiction in terms, which means that it's a sweetened gevura. So he says, so then you see that if you looked at the farm that's on the right, so you have originally it was a daled, which is 2 lines, and a little piece that sticks out. And now you're going to add the other side of the letter Hey is going to be like a vav. So here's a Hey, and it has this little thing here. So therefore you could see how it has the form of the letters Resh and Vav. And this is your kavanah. That what you want to try to do is sweeten the dinim that are found in the concept of the Hey. So then you have to bring the yud that comes from that's the first letter of the name Havaya, B'ofen zeh yesh ba rayo. And if you can do that, then she's going to have a rayo that's going to be that sweetened din that we are trying to produce in Rosh Hashanah. Keep it pratos nechlochim l'lamed beis sefiros l'shtei cholokim. So specifically, we have divided the 32, the sivos, into two different portions. Now you can explain this a little better than the note made it sound. Tes zayin the sivos l'abba, but tes zayin the sivos l'ima. Remember that these are, I believe they're coming from the Mochus Timah de Erik Anpin, which is the Chochmah of Erik Anpin. So the form for the part on the right of the hay looks like a dalet. Shehem shnei vovim, which are actually two vovs. The nosef lechem od yud shuhu ha'oketz, and add on to them. So you have vav and vav. That's 12, and add on to them the oketz, which is a little point that sticks out at the end of the base of the dalet. Besad kulam kaf base, and it makes 22. Asher b'tochem yeshnam shisha aser oros shel chelka. So within it, now we have actually how many? There's 13 portions of light that she got from the 32 meters, the sivos hachma. Asher b'chem chetzim, that's half of the lamed base the sivos in this karos. V'achilei sheb'smol hu oz vav. So the second part is going to be a letter vav. Shemaramas al tosefes shal sheish oros hanitanos ba al yedei abba. So this, the left side of the letter hey, this is going to represent what was added onto her with the from the male from Zeranpin. So that she would have the power lahatzel as shisha kitzvo shel Zeranpin, because that 6. He seemed to be saying, is what was needed to be able to bring out Zeranpin, who is also a 6. So he gives her an extra 6, which allows her to give birth. Now that you've given her another 6 that came from Abba, so the hay, which represents Bina, is now divided into two parts. Two specific different parts. Chelik echad shebiyamin sarasa is really the tzur of a dalet. Shehem shnei vavim, which are two vavs. The nosef lechem od yud, and you add onto those two vavs, which is the concept of 12, or the count of 12, and add on it to the yud, which is the uketz, which is on the side. You're now dividing that letter up, and you make it into a 22, shuha uketz. V'chachelik hasheni, who the vav ashlishi is the third vav that gets added into it. So you have two vavs, which makes the dalet. You have a uketz, which is a 22, and now you're bringing in that on the left side, the letter hey, shebetzad small shuhu vav zeira, b'sad kulam gets to 28. Now let's go on. Let's see how we're going here. He says b'toch kaf ches on this kamer. So we said what? The dalet is two vavs. The left arm is going to be another vav, that's 18, and you have this uketz, which is a 10, it makes 28. So between these 28 that we're mentioning here, shisha aser heim chelik de ima, 16 of them belong to ima. V'shisha hanasaros heim chelik she'abba mosif ba, and that's the portion that Abba added into her. B'kedei lamata gadinim sheba, in order to be able to sweeten the dinim that are inside of her. And I think that what it means is that those 6 then become the agent to produce the Zeranpin. B'kedei sheyeh ba koach la'atzel as shisha kitzvo shel Zeranpin, and now she was going to have that strength. That's what he said. Al noldas b'mena, which were born out from her. V'omdos tachtehu, and stand beneath her. Shehem sod of vav atuluya b'small, which is the secret of the vav, which is really hanging on the left side, is not attached to anything. That's why he says Hataluya. So let's turn the page and we'll look at another little piece, which is kind of interesting in the way that it looks. So here we have it, and you see what you've got here is, you said, you count down the right side, you have Aleph base all the way through Tov, which is the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, and the RASHASH gives us this look. And he says, but what's not by themselves is actually there are 10 of them in each row. So 10 times 22 is 220. So now let's read what the introduction of the RASHASH is. Now, like I say, the RASHASH, I guess everybody in his age, in his day, understood there's missing parts to this. He doesn't write every single word. But the Tiv are going to come along and try to help us to be able to figure it out. So he says like this, Milui the Kasa Hanizka. So we talked about he said, no, actually we didn't really mention that. He said, through the light that comes from the Milui called Kasa, that is the name Akia, spelled with Yudin, Yud Vav Dalet, K Yud, Yud Vav, excuse me, Aleph Lamed Fe, K Yud, Yud Vav Dalet, K Yud. That's how you spell the name Kasa. That's the gematria. Kasa really is the gematria 161. And Nizgar, which is very similar, or exactly the same with the Kolel, as the word Kesef, which we see, which is silver, which in other places not mentioned. It's not part of this piece. So he said, "Al yedech ba'aretz milui kasa nizkar." Yekam elhamshek lenuk migar demochen nizkar. Now you're going to take it from the gar of the mochen that we mentioned. Now, what gar does he mean? I'm not sure. HaKaf Beis, we're going to take from the gar of the mochin. So that's implying that the mochin actually have a gar, and then they also have a vuk. They have a gar, which is 3, and they have, which is, gar stands for Gimel Rishonim, of the 10 spheros. And then you're going to have the bottom part, which is another 7, plus 1 equals 7. So he says, HaKaf Beis, Aspan, Ba'at Atah. So he says, let's see like this. You take down from the gar, that's at the very top of the mochin, which would be the most juicy part. We take down from that 22 letters. And where do we see the 22 letters? It's actually coming from the word Atah. The at part of Atah, the Atah. So the at of Atah. Kol Oz Kulula Me'esa. So each one of those letters from Aleph to Tov is going to have 10 letters within it as well. So that's all that's coming out of the gar. Chutz medalit osius of the shorshi. So except for there were 3 particular letters, which are the letters gichak, v'nishar, kemis barayo. And what's left over when you take away from 220, you take away this word gichak, which refers to one of the utterances in the mouth, which the Tiv is going to help us out here. V'nishar kemis barayo, which remains as the count of rayo, 216. B'zecha rayos yikavin oisecha b'tzir aleph, the Atah rayo. That we also have the concept of this Atah, which is part of rayo. Okay, so let's go on. So he said, "V'zeh harayo yakavin osecha b'tzir aleph." So the rayo itself also could be contained in the letter aleph itself, which is a letter we didn't count, which is letter aleph of Atah. So he says that's a rayo also, and let's go over and look at the note to try to understand this a little bit better. So he says, and I quote. Light print. He says, Atah, hu begematria 2. It's a gematria 406. Geminian Rayo Tzipach. And what is 2? 406. Well, if you take the name Rayo, which is 216, and you add on to it the number 170, which is the last 3 letters of the concept of Mansipach. Mansipach, which are the double letters of the Hebrew alphabet, which are 5 letters. There's actually the basis of the Gevuros inside of the Nukva de Zer Anpin. Now they have something to do also, I know, with the fact that these are sweetened Gevuros to a certain extent, and they allow the Nukva to bring up Mayim Nukvin, which is a whole other story, but that's part of this. Limster Shetevus Atah. Now let's take the word Atah. That's the word. So now, let me get this back in perspective again. We went through a series of Hakavanot on the word Baruch. The second word on the bracha of the Birkei Agos is the word Atah, and that's what we're working on now. So he said, "V'nimser shebetevus Atah mischaleka d'shnei cholok," and we could divide it into 2 parts, and we could make a rayo out of each one of them, and he's going to show you how we do it. He says, "Osius at of Atah, Maram is the rayo Moshe Yisbar, as we're going to explain." V'os hey, which is at the end, v'os hey, remez l'tzpach. It's also a remez to these last three letters of the mansipach, k'dei l'hamtik os tzpach shebemalchus, because this already exists in malchus. There's a mansipach inside of malchus, and we're going to take and work with those, the shorsh of this. We can see how in a minute, and we're going to sweeten by this way, by bringing in this tzpach, that coming from, I guess, from a much higher place. He said what he really kolomer me'eser. He says it comes from the gar of the nook, of the mochin of the nook. So it's coming from a very high place. Kach osios man shal mansifach. So let me figure that. Kedei lahamtik osios tzpach that exists already in malchus. Ki osios man, because the first two letters of the mansipach shal mansipach. Adni, let me pronounce it, Adni Sfasai Tiftach. When we say that has the ability to sweeten the letters man, which exist in the womb, let's say, so to speak, or in the yesod of the nukva. Vayinyan huki osius at of Atah, romezes al kof base osius me'alav ataf. So we said that before. Call Kof base osius column as a spheros, so each one of them will have 10 spheros, so make 220. The Eses Pa'amim Kof base is osius, he comes to the gematria of rak, which is 220 osius. Amnam misbar rak, meramis al rakos v'rachamim, so why we can concentrate on this is we're trying to, in the word atah, once again, to bring sweetness as much as possible into the tremendous dinim that are found inside of the nook. And if you want a little more continuation, we have to understand that whatever is made in the nook is going to come eventually to us. It's inside of us as well. So if it's sweetened at the origin of it, then we have a much better chance of having a sweeter year. So he said, "Lahafach ma'ovodis yemei Rosh Hashanah she'oski bechem." So that's the whole idea there. So then, if you want to get the mansipach, though, you have to take away the number 4, because you got 220. You want to say in that 220 is a raya. So how do you do this? As hadalad osius, of these particular word letters that he said are Gimel, Yud, Kaf, and Kuf, take those letters away. So he said, Meridin as a Dalad Osius, Ein Meridim also, Im Kol Ha-Esus Spheros HaKolulas B'chem, with all the 10 spheros that are a part of them, Shehem Kamisbar Arbaim Osios. So this brings you up to a tremendously high number. Elam, but what we do is we take them away. Rakas Osios Shroshes Bilvad. Only we take away the beginning letter. We leave the other 9. We've gone Os Gimel. Let's say, for example, that's one of the letters that we want to take away. Kolulim Eser Osios. Redim as Gimel Shel Gichak. When you take that letter alone away, Aim Redim as Kala Eser Osios. We don't take the whole line of the Gimel, which is, let's say, this right here. We're going to take this letter away, and then you're going to be left with these other ones. But that will bring you down to number 219, for example. So that's less numbers coming in. So he says, V'kasha Maridim as a Gimel Shel Gichak. Ein Maridim as Kala Eser Osios Sheba Ella Esa Os Gimel HaSharashas Bilvad. The Nisharim B'Bachabetesha Osios, and then remains with it 9 letters. Hatam, so he says, explains. Let me get straightened up a little bit. Hatam Shamaridim Dafka Dalad Osios Gichok. Why those letters? I mean, there's 22 letters here. Whom Mishum Shekaf Beis Osios Nimshachos Bechamesh Motzos Sepeh. So he wants to give us a refresher on this idea. The Motzos Sepeh are a Chaw, Goren, Bumov, or the sounds that are made by Sfasayim, by the lips. Gichak is the sound that originates in the Chich, which is the palate up above in the top of the mouth. Datlanet are letters that are really performed by the tongue. If you don't have a tongue, you can't say these letters. The final one is Zashrash B'Shinayim, which refers to the teeth. Because he says the beginning of the way that the sound comes out, the sound of our speech, comes out through the palate. That sound then goes into the Goren, Shehu Inyan Yichud Chochma Bina, which is another concept. Lambasham is Pashet called the Vyotza L'chutz, and from there the voice comes out and it goes outwards. Ki Ayidei Chibur Checha V'Goren, because this is the Yichud that takes place inside of our mouth with every single letter and sound that we make. The Haina Osius Gichak V'Achoa, those two together, Notrim V'Noldim Shaar Motsoa Sepeh. Everything else is born out of them, because if you can't get it out of the throat, then it wouldn't get to the teeth, the tongue, and the lips. So Osius Gichak Chem Inyan the Chochma, Shuhu Rachamim Gemurim, which represents complete mercy. And the Haknis Osius Ela B'Minyan Rock, we can't use them. They're all merciful letters. These are the letters at the beginning of all goodness. So he says, or rock. So he says, so we come to the number 220 on Nizkarim. The fee she is batal hadin in the gamrechem begodol rachamim, because if you had just rock, which is lashon of rachamim, you would have everything. No dinim would happen, because speech actually is a form of gevura. So he said that's why it could be so bad if it's, say, like we're speaking bad about other people. Baba the Sidur of ROSH HASHANAH, ain't of the battle the dinim ela lamaham tikkun v'labasman, is not to nullify the dinim, but to sweeten them. V'lolan move a kaf base Osius of the aleph base. So later on, we're going to see these 22 letters in the aleph base. Akasher called echem bechem kolu me'eser, which is the drawing that we have on the opposite page. Me'eser Osius milvad Osius gichak, and you'll see it without the letters gichak in them. Sheyesh bechem rak tesha Osius. In those lines, there's only 9 Osius of them, because we would have, as I said before, too much sweetness there. V'hasi bechem Osius ashorish, and so therefore we take the root of them. V'kavon in their message both aleph, it's also to be seen in the letter aleph shall teva Atah, because the teva of the letter aleph, we have said before and talked about it, how it can be formed up into the surah of Rayo. And that's the Shaar. This is Baruch Fleischman, Tikkun Elevator Kola.